Now we've defined what a duty of care is, and we've said the computer driver might have it, but also the human driver might have it. So now we have to figure out how to assign which one of them has the duty of care when. Because if we have confusion, we haven't really fixed the problem. To do this, we need an alternative to the SAE levels to be used for regulation. We're not talking about engineering now, we're talking about regulation. To do that, we're going to use 4 modes. The first is conventional. If the human driver is continuously sustained steering, then the human driver is responsible. Now, if you have things like lane keeping assistance, which nudges you back in the lane, that's not sustained steering by a computer, that's still conventional. So we're not talking about momentary intervention being automated here. We're just talking about the human driver is steering the steering wheel. That's conventional, human driver is responsible. Next is fully autonomous. Think robotaxis and uncrewed trucks. The computer driver is steering, the computer driver is doing everything, so the manufacturer ought to be responsible for the computer driver. Why the manufacturer, not someone else? Well, the manufacturer is the party in the best position to fix safety problems that might be there. You could try and make the vehicle owner responsible, but they don't have access to the software. How are they supposed to know whether it's safe, let alone fix a safety problem? It sort of has to be the manufacturer. The third mode is testing. So this is any vehicle that is a development vehicle. It says beta or beta testing or it's pre-production. It's not a product fit for use at scale without test drivers in there. So anytime there's a product that has a click-through that says, by the way, this is beta, it's immature, it might try and kill you, our software isn't completely done, that's testing. And for testing, the manufacturer should be responsible to have a safe test plan and to qualify the test drivers, and they ought to be responsible for the performance of the test drivers. So if someone is harmed by a testing computer driver, the manufacturer should be the one to compensate that person. Now, the manufacturer may turn around and have a problem with the test driver, but let them sort it out. If you're a pedestrian and you're hit by a piece of experimental technology, you shouldn't be the one having to sort out who's responsible. It should be the manufacturer because they're ultimately the ones who put that equipment on the street. The fourth mode, this is the tricky one. It's the awkward middle. It's supervisory mode. So that's, as the icon says, there's a driver there. They're supposed to be paying some level of attention, but they're not actually steering the car. They're just supervising what's going on. This is a unification of SAE levels 2 and 3 into a single regulatory bin. And the reason that makes sense is, at level 2 or level 3, the driver is expected to pay some level of attention, and in every car and sometimes in different modes in the car, that level of attention may vary, but the driver is supposed to be there. On the other hand, the automation steering, and we know drivers are really bad at supervising automation. So by putting the primary burden on the manufacturer, we're pressuring them to design a safe system that ordinary people can operate safely, rather than saying, well, we're going to do whatever and we'll just blame the humans so we don't have to worry about safety. That's going to lead to unsafe outcomes. So here, the computer is steering, and it's probably also controlling speed and so on, but steering is the bright line difference between whether it's in supervisory mode or conventional mode, and the human's supposed to supervise. When activated, when it accepts control of steering, the computer driver accepts the duty of care, and the human role is determined by the operational concept. The manufacturer can tell the human to do whatever they want. They can say pay attention, they can say take a nap, but we don't really care because the manufacturer has the duty of care, and it's up to them to make sure the human's doing whatever's expected of them, which will vary depending on the vehicle and the feature. Now, the computer driver can relinquish the duty of care. So if the computer driver decides that it can't handle what's going on, in a supervisory mode, it's okay for the computer driver to insist that the person take control back. But it has to do so for one of two reasons. The first is driver monitoring violation, and the second is due to exiting the operational design domain. So in driver monitoring violation, the computer driver is responsible for monitoring that the person is as attentive as they need to be. So it's possible that if the computer driver says, hey, person, you're supposed to notice a parked fire truck in the middle of the highway, that the person might be responsible if they crash into a fire truck, but not if the person hasn't been looking at the road. The computer driver has an obligation to ensure the person's as attentive as they need to be, and to alarm and put duty of care back on the driver if the person is not being as attentive as they need to be. Similarly, these systems won't work everywhere, and that's okay. But when they're not working, they have to pass control back to the human driver. They can't just keep working and then blame the human for not noticing. For example, if they don't work in rain and it starts raining, the computer should be telling the driver, hey, human driver, it's raining, I can't work in the rain, you're going to have to take control, rather than just blaming the human driver for a crash when maybe the person didn't even realize that the light mist qualified as rain. How would they know? There's an important thing here. The computer can't just dump control back in the lap of the human. There needs to be a transition time that's reasonable, and probably it has to be at least 10 seconds. Anything less than 10 seconds is probably making an unreasonable ask. It's pretty clear that in many cases it's a lot longer than 10 seconds. So the 10 seconds is not a mandatory cutoff, but rather a safe harbor. If the computer says, hey, human driver, take over, and it's been less than 10 seconds before a crash, the computer driver still has duty of care. After 10 seconds, if it makes sense in that circumstance, then the duty of care is returned to the human driver. The computer driver still has to do best effort in case the human doesn't pick up the slack, but at some point it's the human driver's fault for not regaining control. And there's going to have to be some reasonableness language given the driver monitor. If the driver was allowed to go to sleep by the driver monitor and then expected to come fully awake and regain control and process a complicated situation, that's not going to be reasonable. This is going to depend on the design concept, and ultimately this will have to be figured out by a jury. But the point is here, you have to give the driver at least 10 seconds to take over and give them warning that they need to take over, either because they've not been paying the attention they need to pay or because you're exiting the operational design domain.